Hey, excellent. You're here. Let's get at it. So I'm going to be the sort of academic side of this tag team, and that's what I'm going to start with is a little bit of, well, I'm going to kind of bring you back to like intro biology or intro psychology for those of you who had it, and really remind you of something that you've probably learned before, but perhaps haven't appreciated as much as you might. And I think you'll really see the relevance of it this time. And I got my friend here, Bruno, to help me make this point, as you'll see when we go through. So the real purpose of this video is to really give you a sense of what anxiety is, because it turns out it's actually a very simple response of our body that has evolved to kind of help us survive in a very specific situation. So let me tell that story, and let me start at the beginning. Well, at this sort of beginning anyway, caveman days. And really the fact that our bodies have evolved these two distinct modes of being. One that's really related to long-term survival and one that's related to short-term survival. So if we kind of think of this, first of all, in the long-term survival camp, what we're talking about here is really digestion. The idea that we go out and we acquire food. And so these guys might be out gathering and getting berries and getting whatever. And when they consume that food, those nutrients keep our body healthy and our tissues strong. And so one of our modes of being is all about that, digesting our food and delivering the nutrients to our body while eliminating the waste. The other mode, though, is about short-term situations when some sort of threat suddenly appears and suddenly digesting our food is not a priority. We need to survive this moment. And that's the system that's going to be linked to anxiety. So if we go a little bit more specifically and get to the brain here, your brain has within it a very old set of a very old system. It's sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain or the limbic system. And every animal has this sort of primitive system, and it's one that every now and then will just kind of take control. Again, because it's there to ensure our short-term survival. So in certain situations, it just kind of says, hey, stand back, I've got this. And so let me tell you a little bit about how this system works. There's a number of structures in the limbic system. The one I'm going to really highlight are these yellow bits here called the amygdala. The amygdala are kind of like our spider senses. Spider-Man, when he says, oh, my spider sense is tingling, because he senses danger, right? That's what the amygdala does. All of the input coming into our brain all comes in through the hypothalamus and the thalamus, and it's all processed by the amygdala. And the amygdala specifically is looking for threat, looking for danger. And if it senses something in the external world that it thinks represents a significant danger, a threat to it, what it will do is trigger that change in the body between those two modes. So it's kind of like a light switch between these two ways of being. Okay, so let me unpack the ways of being just a little bit more. Our brain communicates with our body through what we call the peripheral nervous system. And this peripheral nervous system has these two modes, which we sometimes call the parasympathetic mode and the sympathetic mode. So the best way to kind of give you the full story is to give you a story here. Let's imagine you've had a long day. You're home, you're relaxing. And so when you relax, you're kind of sitting on the couch watching what you watch. This is when your parasympathetic mode becomes active. This is the digestion system. And so what we see is that your pupils constrict. It's kind of like you're turning off from the outside world a little bit. You get more saliva in your mouth because that's promoting digestion. Your breathing and your heart rate slow. Okay, you're just relaxing. And so they're slowing down. Your blood flow is slowing down. And what we see is all of the organs of digestion now get what we call upregulated. They get activated. So we have the stomach, the gallbladder here, all the intestines, the bladder itself, etc. All of these organs now start doing their thing. And their thing is, extracting the nutrients from the food we've eaten and delivering those nutrients to our body, removing the waste and eliminating that waste, getting rid of it. And so that's, you don't feel this way while you're sitting on the couch, but that's essentially what your body is in the process of doing while you're on the couch. Now, imagine you're there relaxed, and imagine you're home alone. And imagine upstairs you suddenly hear a window smash. What happens? Input from the external world, sound of that window smashing. The amygdala says, oh, danger, threat, and it flips the little switch. And suddenly, it's not about digestion anymore. It's about action, okay? And so you move to what we call the sympathetic mode. And in many ways, the sympathetic mode is opposite the relaxation mode. And that's going to become critical as we talk a little bit about some ways to control this. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What actually happens? You're sitting on that couch, you hear the smash. Well, your pupils dilate. Suddenly you're interested in what's going on in the outside world. Your ears, of course, cannot dilate, but if they could, they would, in the sense that, in a very general sense, you're suddenly hyper aware to your external world, very sensitive to what's going on around you. All of this digestive stuff slows down. Your salivation, your stomach, your gallbladder, your intestines, your bladder, they suddenly now down-regulate. It's like, you know what? Forget about digestion. And instead, your lungs start breathing more, your heart beats faster. And what these two things are doing is pumping oxygen-rich blood to all of your muscles. Okay? It's literally... That's the tingly feel you feel, by the way. That's oxygen, okay? Oxygen feels kind of weird when it's in the muscles. And so, when these situations arise, and think of some emergency, maybe one of your children suddenly had an accident or something, and you had to spring to the rescue. What did it feel like? Well, you probably felt like you had a whole bunch of energy and maybe even a whole bunch of strength, because you do. What the result of all this is, this oxygen-rich blood going to your body, is it makes your muscles super strong. And this is the system we sometimes colloquially call the fight or flight system, because that's literally how it feels. You feel compelled to do something. You're in that couch. You heard the smashing upstairs. You're not just going to sit there and continue watching television. You're going to do something. And what you do can often be categorized by those two things. You're either going to go up there and take on whatever's going on. Maybe it's a raccoon, who knows? You're going to go up there and take it on. That's the fight response. Or you're going to say, you know what? I think I'd rather not be here right now. And you hop in your car and get the heck away. That's the flight response. There is occasionally a freeze response while people are trying to figure out, do I fight or do I flight? So sometimes, people have all this anxiety, but they're actually sort of frozen for a moment as they process the situation and then ultimately fight or flee. But that's the kind of situation we're in. Okay? So that whole story again, you're sitting, you're relaxing, your body's doing digestion, you sense danger, and suddenly you're in this short-term survival mode. This mode that makes you really strong. And you've heard of this before, right? We've all heard these stories of, it's usually a mother lifting a car to save a child, but imagine this police officer was walking the streets, heard a commotion, came around and saw a child trapped under that car. This is an emergency, and the person will feel suddenly that anxiety response, even though it's not personally threatening to her. There's a threat situation going on there. There's a dangerous situation, and she feels through empathy what this child is going through. So her sympathetic mode becomes active, and this could be the result. She could literally have the strength to lift a car. So that child could be brought out. So we've heard those kinds of stories before, and we've all felt this, right? You've all had times when you were driving the car and suddenly you realize you have no grip on the road anymore because it's icy or snowy, or goodness knows what else. Something happened in your life that suddenly was a threat to your life, and you feel that system kick in. And we often feel like time slows down and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's because our senses are hyper acute. So we're processing a lot of information per unit time. That makes it feel like time slows. Okay, so that's the basic anxiety response. And that's really what I want you to get in this video. This basic anxiety response It's a special survival mode that evolved specifically to deal with sudden acute threats, kind of like Bruno here. Imagine you were hunting and gathering your fruits and stuff as Mr. Caveman and Bruno steps out. That's what this system is meant to do. And if it's Bruno, we're probably fleeing, right? Because Bruno's a big, strong bear. It might be silly to fight him. But whether we fight or whether we flee, typically within some short period of time, we are away from the danger. We've either overcome the danger or we've escaped the danger or we're dead. But let's take the dead one off the table for now. So we've either overcome it or we escaped and it's over. And so then the sympathetic mode stops and you go back to your parasympathetic way of being, digestion. Okay, so it's meant to be what we call something to deal with acute stressors, something that pops up, must be dealt with, and then is gone. But what happens if Bruno hangs around? COVID is the bear that greets us every morning when we wake up. It is what we call a chronic threat, not an acute one. And that's what's suddenly making anxiety such a prevalent issue now. So, next video, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the issues that happen when the threat is chronic, and we will go from there. Thank you.